Eric,
Omar.
this is an extremely strong episode. First,
Wait, do you mean it's a monster episode?
it's monstrously strong because,
Okay.
first off, we have one of the world's strongest living humans.
Are we talking like kaiju monster strong?
Kaiju monster strong. Now,
Hey man, be careful. We don't want any lawsuits.
don't want any
This
loss.
is true.
Just a vaguely monstrous from non-region specific, but nonetheless quite clear in terms of the monstrosity, how gigantic they are. Cyclopean, some might even say. Now, this is a monstrously strong episode because we have one of the world's strongest humans, but also, Jesus, we have one of the world's strongest lovers in Eric. So this is just one of those spiritually. And I guess I wanted to ask you this question. We're going to go like real deep into the real things people want to hear about. Is there anyone maybe in your life that provides that spiritual or emotional strength that is just like the bedrock to some of your actual physical strength? Because that's something we've spoken about on Iron Culture, and Eric's that for me, but everyone kind of needs that. It could be an inanimate object, it could be an idea, it could be a human being, it could be family, it could be multiple people.
Damn, that's a really good question
Thank you.
because I can give you several kinds of things, people, or concepts that provide such like strength, not just physically, but as well as mentally and spiritually. So I guess I'll give you a person, a thing, and like a word / concept. So for a person, I would say my mother, just because she's just like the most mentally and emotionally strongest woman I've ever met. She taught me a lot to be who I am today, like just a young man that I've become. She taught me how to be relentless. Oh man, I might as well just throw in my whole family in here. It's just a bunch of like my immediate family, like the things that we've gone through. They taught me how to be relentless, how to be fierce, how to stand up for myself and my beliefs, how to stand up for others who don't have the presence or the voice to do so for themselves. And just that, I'll keep it short with that. And then a thing I would say is, I guess, I don't really have a thing, but a concept. And I actually just got this word tattooed on me yesterday, and it's indomitable. And to be indomitable is to be like, you pretty much can't be subdued. And the concept of that is kind of similar to being down but not out. So you really lose when you yourself as an individual decide to take a knee, to take a step back, and when to give up. Because like going through injuries, like breakups, horrible life circumstances, that happens to everybody. Nobody is an exception to loss, to tragedy. But who you are as a person, if you are indomitable, you will continue to go on forward regardless, because you have people that depend on you, you have people that look up to you, because you have a responsibility to upkeep that mantle, right? So those are just kind of a couple things, I guess. I hope I answered your question pretty good.
You did fantastic, Jesus. See, Eric, I asked this. This is what I do. I ask a serious question, but I give a joke example because that's just the way that I am. But Eric, we're kicking it off here. We're getting right into it.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a silly bit related to that, you can't do it now. It'd be disrespectful to answer he gave. So we just have to.
But that's
we have to like actually do a podcast now.
That is wonderful. Though I do wonder about that question though, where people derive their sources of power or their inspiration or their formative years. What are some of the things from their perspective contributed to the end result that we see? Because I think sometimes people can not falsely attribute to a contemporary saying like, oh, I did like. Man, as soon as I started doing pause squats, bro, like I went from a 700-pound squat to a 900-pound squat. And I think we've had some of those conversations, a lot of those conversations, but sometimes getting to know the person, the hunk behind the lifts, can be extremely powerful to provide an avatar of understanding said journey.
Yeah, and I agree.
Yeah, on that note, first off, Jesus, welcome to Iron Culture. It's a privilege and a pleasure, my friend. So, got to put that out there. We got Jesus Olivares on the chat, current PA national champ, also a little bit of a world champion in the house.
Reigning world champ.
That's right, the reigning world champ. I love it. That's what's up. So no, we got the we got the champ. The champ is here, as they say. So let's just make sure everyone knows who is talking, so that they listen. But I was reflecting on what you were saying, Omar, and also what you were sharing, Jesus. And I think, sometimes you see these like really pithy comments, like, if I blank 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 blank, I could do that. And I used to just be like, right, if you could, you would. But I don't think that's always true. So having been involved in powerlifting and bodybuilding now for, 15, 16, 17 years, which makes me feel old. I've got a whole like driver's license and nearly able to go to R-rated movies and, of bodybuilding time. I have met some people who are just absolute freaks, like some people who walk around in what I would consider damn near stage condition, or some people who are like, yeah, just, I do bench on Saturdays. I come in and they're throwing up like 405, and these people probably could be world champions. And the question is, well, why don't they have the drive to do that? Because just because one has the capacity to squat nearly 1,000 pounds or deadlift, 900 pounds or bench 600 pounds, there's a pretty strong reason that is required to actually push yourself to get there. And I think it's always an interesting question to figure out, what is it for you? Why are you here doing this and pushing yourself to this level? So I think that's some really helpful insight, and I'm glad we kicked the podcast off with some of those things that inspire you and make up who you are. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's interesting, Omar.
Okay. All right. So I guess I can chime in a little bit. So ever since I was little, the reason, like, I don't consider myself a weeb, but I do like a lot of anime. Just because the way that they structure the concept of hard work, perseverance, achieving new levels of strength, power, or I'm not gonna say that. So that's why I like anime, because it's the story they tell of somebody who starts in stage 0 and they go through hardships, but at the end of the series, they reach level 100. And that was something that I would always fantasize about as a young child, like just being able to reach greatness, excellency, high standards, right? But as a kid, the closest thing that I could imagine was like, oh man, like I wish I was a Super Saiyan. I wish I could like fly through the sky and like have these badass battles and like fight aliens and be someone of high, how do I say this, like high stature. And whenever I was playing football in high school and college, like I wanted to go to the leagues. Whenever I switched from football to track and field, it switched from playing in the NFL to going to the Olympics. So whenever I dropped out of college and I left collegiate sports behind, in my head I was like, okay, I mean, I need to find something to invest my time into. I need to find something to focus on and just nurture myself and try to just be good at something, right? Because I've always been an athlete, and whenever I walked away from that, there was a transition period where I was going through a bad breakup. I just needed to find something to keep me accountable. So I was like, well, I was always kind of good at lifting weights. So I was kind of in between strongman and powerlifting, but I'm from Odessa, Texas. It's like this small town in West Texas where it's like nothing but oil field. Like when kids graduate, if you're not in the top 10 and you go to UT or some high-end university, you go straight to the oil field. Or unless you get like a scholarship to play sports, right? Like those are really the only ways out. It's either through academics or athletics. And if you don't qualify in either area, you just kind of get funneled into the business. So I just kind of figured like I should start training, start lifting, figured go through the bodybuilding route, but then that really wasn't my thing. So I remember like it was New Year's Eve on 2018 going to 2019. I told myself, I'm like, I'm going to do either one strongman competition or one powerlifting meet before the year ends. So I kind of started watching like a lot of Martinez Lissi's, a lot of like strongman, a lot of power. Like so when I kind of started watching like Russell's videos, some of Joey's videos, and I started to kind of garner this idea of how to program and coach myself. So up until October, I coached myself to like a 725 squat, a 475, 465 bench, and like a 765 deadlift. But I'm someone who I understand the concept of winning, and you need someone in your corner who's been around the block several times, someone who's been proven on the highest stage, someone who's taken other like-minded individuals with similar capabilities to the same stage. And like Joey, like literally filled out all three of these check boxes. So I was like, I need Joey Flex to be my coach, and I wouldn't have settled for anybody else because I wanted to be a world champion. I wanted to be the best in the world. And that's kind of how that happened. But I guess tie it back to the question, I kind of got sidetracked, is I just have always had this sense of responsibility, this sense of duty to achieve greatness. Because in my mind, when it comes to prioritizing my life, it's so easy for me to prioritize things for powerlifting, for what I'm doing, to be the best. But when it comes to like other areas of my life, like I'm not really so disciplined in those aspects. Like when my girlfriend tells me to fold the laundry, like she's gotta tell me like 5 times. But when I, she's gonna get a kick out of that. But when it comes to like training, as soon as 1 o'clock rolls around, like boom, I'm out the door, I'm in my car, and I'm on my way to the gym. So it's like, for whatever reason, you know, whether we can get into the psychological aspects, it's like I just have like this desire in my heart to just be great. Like that's it. Just be great. And I feel like that is what I'm currently doing, and I'm in the pursuit of. I feel like I'm at that level where I can say that I am great, but I'm not the greatest. So there's still work to be done. I got to add those last 3 letters to my moniker. You know, I'm great, but I want to be the greatest.
Started from the bottom, now the whole team Super Saiyans. That's what's up. Well, I think that's really helpful insight, and there's a couple different pathways I want to go down. First, I don't think you have to say it. I'm happy to say it for you. You are absolutely great. And if we want to talk about the greatest, you could make a solid argument that you're 2.5 kilos away. You know what I'm saying? So for those who don't know, you just totaled, and by the way, I didn't put enough respect on your name. You're a PA national champion, but you're also a USAPL national champion from a couple years back. So that's just something that we should also acknowledge. Because if there wasn't a federation split, you'd be a 2 times USAPL national champ, and I think that's saying something, because as we've talked about, USAPL nationals is extremely competitive competition. Go ahead, man.
I was just going to say that I think I can make that exception that wherever I go, the competition goes. So I think it's appropriate to say that I am the 2-time USA national champ. And anyone else who wants to claim that, like, I'm going to say congratulations. Like, you still had to beat a lot of people to get that. But to really be the best super in the United States and in the world, like, you got to go where the competition is. You have to pursue the number 1 spot, and currently that's in my possession. And it's, that's just my opinion. Like, if I was ranked number 3 and somebody else was in my position, like, I would have been at PA Nats in a heartbeat. Like, that's honestly why I chose PA over USAPL, because I was really waiting to see where Ray was going to go. And the minute I saw him go PA, I was like, Joey, I texted my sponsors. I was like, we're going. Like, that's it. PA Nationals, that's the next comp. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Well, I tell you what, I would love to see I can't wait to see when you guys both get to take the platform. So I mentioned the 2.5 kilo thing, and there's a reason I specifically mentioned that. So at PA Nats, you totaled 1,110 kilos, and the highest total that has ever been done by Ray Williams in the IPF is 1,112. So, and I think what's exciting about that is dear sir, how old are you?
I will be turning 24 June 5th.
Yeah, that's what I think is so cool about this, is that I mean, I do not want to make it sound like I am disparaging the name of Ray Williams. I'm a huge fan. He's a great man. He's an incredible powerlifter. He's got the most impressive squat, that has ever happened in the IPF. But he is, I think it's just pretty wild to me, because I think he was in his 30s. I want to say he was early 30s, if I recall correctly, when he put up his best total. And you're like 10 years younger, and so I think it speaks to the type of future that we might see. And if knock on wood, you stay healthy, and you stay passionate and motivated, it's just going to be really, really cool to see. And I think it's exciting, and I as a fan, I just appreciate that you're in this space and you're doing your damn thing, because I think it's always cool. I think people, to some degree, and I'm not going to try to sound too airy-fairy, I think they are limited in their capacity based upon what they think is possible. Omar, we've talked about this before, and you've brought it up many times that, when you deadlifted 500 pounds on your YouTube channel, and people are like, oh, did he hop on gear? And that's just not a perception that people have today. That standard has kicked up 100, 200 pounds, and rightfully so, because now we're looking at a much broader spectrum of people being involved. But it's not just, I don't think it's just the statistics of, okay, if we have 5 times the amount of people in powerlifting, we're going to see more outlier and peak responders. That is true, but I also think that there's a feedback effect to when you see the peaks. Perhaps you are less likely to limit yourself in thinking what you're capable of. So I think you have a positive trickle down effect just performing well. So and it's cool that you see it as a responsibility, because I think that's in a way that's giving back to the sport rather than just being like, I'm the king of the sport, which I think is a great attitude.
Yeah, no, Jesus, I was going to say real quick, why I laughed when Eric asked your age and you said 24 is because we know this, man. Like, being 24 years old, putting up numbers that you are putting up. Shout out to someone else that we've had on the podcast. Taylor Atwood's a fantastic example. I believe now he's in his early 30s, but he really, and then we've had Jen Thompson on. Jen Thompson is now in her, I think, early 40s, but you see some of these phenoms that come into the field. So like Taylor, in his mid-20s, I think he was tearing it up, crushing records, so on and so forth. But he continued that process of self-improvement. And that's why one of my favorite, coldest lines recently from a powerlifter was when he entered last year USAPL Nationals, and everyone, because he basically was MIA from social media. And so they assumed he was going to put up a total in a similar space to what he had done before. And there was rumors that he was injured. Like, basically, his status was uncertain. And all he said in a post was, you think you're close, but you have no idea. He had been woodshedding, as musicians refer to, so like that process of just practicing your craft in silence. He came to nationals, blew everyone out of the water, and this is what I'm making up the year of a professional competition at that level. Let's say it's 8th year. We have seen, and that's why I want to hear from you, Jesus, just a bit about your journey, because you said like Joey Flex, and that's a really interesting conversation. Like Joey Flex and the rise of just new coaches, I'd say, in the last 8 years, and this idea of then being able, like, you're a competitor and you're also a coach yourself, but that journey from getting Joey Flex to where you are now, what that looked like. But I could say this with absolute certainty, Eric, what makes it exciting as a spectator of the sport is that I remember vividly Brett Gibbs, so 83 kg, because I refer to that class a lot because that'd be in quotations like my competitive class. I remember Johnny Candido, that's full credit to him. That's how I discovered Brett. And I thought, this guy is insane. This Kiwi from New Zealand's putting up these numbers no one thought would be possible, right, Jesus? And then we thought that was the standard. And I like what you basically said, like raising the standard, and that trickle down effect, that feedback we'd be referring to, Eric. People see him, and it's like, that's the guy right there. Will more people enter? Well, then you get Russell Orhe. You had John Hack for a minute in 2016, I think, where he competed. And all of a sudden, this number that seemed unfathomable, that was so much higher than everyone else, suddenly there's new entrants. Yeah, to Eric's point, is it once again as we increase the total population participating, we have more of those outliers? Certainly. But once someone sees what is feasible and then there's active competition, like to your point, you kind of have a mark. So like Ray Williams is a legend. I saw him in 2018 at Arnold, and I must say he's one of the few people that I felt personally was much more muscular in person, where it's hard. Like when you see him in video, you're like, yeah, that's like a large dude. I've met a few like super heavyweights, but it's like when I slapped his shoulder, I was like, God damn, that's all muscle right there. I just remember thinking that in my head. But the point being is that in the 83 kg class, Brett Gibbs was the standard. He's still a legend in the sport. It got raised continuously. Ray Williams, to me personally, just being a spectator from like 2016, 2017, he was the super heavyweight standard where it's like, will someone break that record? Like in the next 10 years, he's going to set a standard in quotations. Will it be broken? And it always seems like we're at this limit. And then there's some theoretical hunk who's 24 years old that's knocking on that door. And that to me is what is so exciting about that sport. This sport. So, Jesus, I'm wondering, you gave a wonderful little background story about like yourself, your motivations, and then you, like, I'm not surprised when you spoke about football. I'd love to dovetail later on about that because I've heard so many things about, Texas and the high caliber level, Eric, of the athletes. And there's always been this mythical thing being uttered in powerlifting. Oh, when the football players enter powerlifting, it's over, right? Like there's basically this hidden pool talent.
And that's happened for the last half decade. Like, I mean, think like Taylor, like half people you talked about,
right.
Like we had Ellis McLean on, and we had like, and Ray, obviously. So, and then yourself. So it's not, I mean, we're getting a truer glimpse into what kind of athlete pool there is in like real sports. So.
So hey, talk to me, man. Then talk to me. So you set it up perfectly. Where you said you wanted a coach, you got the Flex Fam on lock. Talk to me from what year that was, your training style. Just give me that history, man, from around that point to you basically winning a nationals recently, and then as we go on to worlds coming up and so forth. Set us up here.
Okay, so I guess we should start with my goals, right? So my goal, I needed to find someone who was going to provide an avenue that was going to match my goals blow for blow, right? So at the time, when I was talking to my brother about like, okay, like what do we want to do? What do I want to do? It was from the very, very beginning, the standard, like how you said, it was Ray Williams. So when I came into the sport, I really wasn't thinking like, oh, like I want to do this, I want to do that. No, it was, I want to set myself up in a position to compete and potentially beat him head to head. So from the very beginning, like that was where my mind was at. My mind was in the future. Like everything I was doing was like a little investment towards the day that matchup was going to come. So every day I would go into the gym. Like obviously when you have the rankings, and I start off where I started, right? I think my first total was like 1987, something like that. I was like a little bit off from breaking 2K, my first meet. So that kind of put me, I think, like fifth best junior. And I was like, I think like number 10 overall. So from the very beginning, I was like, okay, Ray's number one. I have placed 9 through number 1 to jump. So little by little, I started jumping over these guys. So like these are individuals that at the time I had engraved in my head. So it was like boom, 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 right? It's like just stacking chips up until we were in the position to challenge Ray. Unfortunately, he did go through a couple mishaps. He got COVID before nationals last year, and then this past year he had like the hip injury. But as far as like with Joey, like literally Joey's the first things he told me when we were messaging each other was, I think I can help you get to where you want to be. And I don't even think I had told him yet about like wanting to beat Ray. He literally told me, he was like, I think we have a shot at potentially challenging Ray one day, as long as we keep our head down and we keep on working. So from that minute, I was like, man, like Joey's got faith in me. He believes in me. And that's kind of where our relationship started to flourish. And then little by little, we started to get to know each other better. We would communicate. It was almost like instant. Like it just felt like my gut. It was the right decision. I don't see myself working or being coached by anybody else, because when it comes to meet day, I have 100% confidence in whatever number Joey wants to put on the board. Like even like a good example is, at this past nationals, like we had the option to either go for 992 or 1,003, mm-hmm. right? And honestly, I didn't even know what my second attempt was. Like that was all Joey. He was just like, I'm gonna put this on the board, and I'm like, okay, I gotta hit it. And then I didn't really quite process what we were going for our third until I looked at the number, and I was like, wait a minute, that's just 5 kilos under 1,003. Like So that's 992. And I was like, wait, what was my second? Because I was under the impression that we were going to go like 903, 948, and then we were going to go for whatever was there on the third. So to go 903, 959, that was like a little jarring for me because I was like, that was not what we had planned, but just the trust and the faith that I have in Joey to call my numbers, like that's like I have no doubt. If Joey puts a number on there, I'm like, okay, like whatever, like he's the numbers guy. He's got like this game plan in his head, like, and it's just my job as the athlete to execute. And I feel like that's a mindset that I kind of developed and took from when I used to play football because when you're out there, you practice a certain play over and over and over, and this play has a structure to it, right? Like obviously it starts with the offensive line. Like the offensive line each has their assignment as far as like breaking a gap, either A, B, or C, like just depending on like where the play is going. And you have to be, I don't want to use the word like obedient, but how do I say this? That's true. We'll say like obedient. You have to know how to be like have humility and obedience to be the best athlete you can be. Because I feel like so many guys nowadays, like they're just all ego. They're like, man, like I can do this by myself. Like I don't need that. I don't need a team around me. I don't need a support system. Because powerlifting is a solo sport, you know.
Mm.
When you're on the platform, it's just you and you, right? Like you don't really have a team or whatever. But I feel like what we're building at Flex Training Systems, we bring that team-like atmosphere to everybody where like everyone, if you're wearing Flex, like, oh shoot, man, like I don't know who you are, but you're wearing Flex, I'm gonna say hello. So that was for me, that was it, man. I'm a really big like friend and family guy. Like I love to have people around me that reciprocate the energy that I invest in them because I'm all about being loving and caring and just being as good a person as I possibly can and just loving everybody, right? Because I'm not the most devout Christian, but like I do believe in God, and Christians we're not here to judge and like literally discriminate other people. It's the opposite. Like it's our job to just make everyone feel loved regardless of their beliefs, their agenda, and their system. So it's like that's what I try to embody. Like if I see somebody, I just try to be as nice as I can, and that's really it. And like I feel like everything about me just really resonates with Joey and the organization. So it was really an easy choice for me. Like everything from top to bottom, from goals to just everything's just really been working out. And then like now I've been working under Joey for almost a year, and it's been a really life-changing event in my life. It's allowed me to just become a more responsible human being, a more responsible man, and I don't really see any point in looking back now. It's just from here on out, it's just we're gonna chug along forward, and we're gonna do it side by side.
I love it. You know, Omar, I was reflecting on, well, first, how do you not just like this guy? I mean, come on. Yeah, just that mission statement of making everyone feel loved. And of course, crushing Ray Williams and taking the title. Not just kidding.
With love.
With love, yes. With love and massive squats and deadlifts. But yeah, dude, it's so there's a couple things I wanted to highlight for people. You know, you mentioned how, you know, the first time you competed, you're like, oh shit, I'm like in the top 10, you know, here, and then even higher in juniors. You know, I can start slowly, you know, moving up. And I think the characterization of it being of slowly is I find slightly, you know, hilarious to me. I think you put like 80 kilos on your total from that first comp to the next, and you've been able to make these really solid improvements. And just what you were talking about there, how your second attempt was the most you'd ever squatted on the platform. I think it was like 7.5 kilos more than your third attempt from the last competition. So it's just really cool to see you on the rise. That I think it's exciting, you know, just to put it straight up as a sports fan. And I was reflecting as you were talking about your perspective of being community oriented, having family around you, and not really relating to people who want to try to quote unquote do it all themselves. And I think, you know, one thing, Omar, so like I mentioned, we've had, you know, LS on, we've had Taylor. they're highly competitive individuals, which you can see in the way they approach powerlifting, which is totally fine. But at the same time, like, LS has worked with me for nutrition. He's, had coaches around him. He reaches out. He is very much a community oriented person. If you talk to him, if you know him, he's presented at conferences with me. He really likes to give back to the world and to the community. It's a huge part of who he is. Taylor, 100%, like, he has a partnership with TSG. He's been working with Jason, and they're very kind of, similar mindset to what Jesus was sharing. And I'm thinking of the times where I've seen athletes who have had a negative effect of their ego, and they often are in other individual sports. Like, I can think of boxers or MMA fighters who their ego gets to the point where it blinds them, and then they get caught. They get knocked out, pinned, what have you. And it's they're never the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, like, the changes in Roy Jones Jr. or some other MMA fighters. Yeah. I don't even want to bring it up because it's tough. And I think when you have the competitiveness that team sport gives you, but also you have the environment and the principles that team sport teaches you, it sort of protects you against that. Sometimes I'll be honest with you, Jesus, and I don't mean this as a knock to anybody who came from a football background. Sometimes I do think like that. I need to go beat them, and this is head to head. Is sometimes I think it's not like stupid or anything like that, but it does always be like, oh, it's surprising to me as someone who's been in powerlifting, because there's no defense. It's like both people are just going to be as strong as they can, and whoever's stronger wins. And sometimes, like, the language that LS or Taylor will use, and I've talked to them, it's about like, oh, I got you. And it's like, I mean, you're just going to do your lifts. So it's not like that you're not like beating them on the day. But I think that mindset is not necessarily a problem when it comes from that team sport background. It doesn't get in your way. If anything, it facilitates, it drives you. And then because you're so team oriented, you're going to do smart things. Like, of course I have a coach. Like, I had a defensive coach, I had an offensive coach, I had a head coach, and an S&C coach. Why wouldn't I have a coach if I'm doing powerlifting? But some of the people who maybe don't have that background, but have the talent and maybe have an ego that either matches it or outpaces it, they don't see it that way, to their own detriment. And the last thing I'll say, because I know I'm just kind of monologuing here, is that I think the proof is in the pudding of how well you operate in a team environment. Like, most of the time when you go on open powerlifting and you look at a lifter, you'll see their best lifts, and then you'll notice that they're picking and choosing from, like, to make those best lifts from the last 6, 7, 8 competitions. You went 9 for 9 at PA Nats, and your best lifts on your personal bests are your third attempts on each one. So it's like you had a plan, you executed, and that's the super meet. Like, everybody wants that to happen. And I think it speaks to the fact that you collaborated in a way that is facilitating the best performance for you. And I think that's awesome. It's rare, because that's a hard thing to do, to get out of your way that much, get out of one's own way that much. So no, man, just to boost up what you're saying, I think it's apparent in what we're seeing on the platform.
Yeah. Well, hold on. I do want to say something about what you just said. So the person I just described, like, that's like Jesus, the family man. That's like Jesus, the son and the boyfriend. Because I'm not gonna lie, I can get a little crazy, because I am a hyper competitive person as well. So it's like, when you said that, it makes me like, man, like, I feel like I wasn't being completely honest, because there are times where, and it does come, I feel like it does come from playing football, because I wasn't like this before, and my offensive line coach, he taught me how to bring, like, that side of myself out. He taught me how to, like, be aggressive, how to take what I want, how to, like, because when you're playing football and you're playing in your alignment position, you literally have to exert your influence onto another human being. Now imagine that. It's not a combat sport where you, like, can throw punches and knock somebody out and put them in a chokehold, but you have to move them. You are physically exerting your will and moving somebody against their own. So when it comes to training, in my head, I do come to those places where it's like, because there can only be one. There can only be one champion. There can only be one record holder on each lift, right? There can only be one number one spot, one guy at the top. Everybody else is just like you. Everybody else has dreams. Everybody else has aspirations. Everybody else is working hard. Everybody else is trying to find some way to beat the other one. So I think you do need a little bit of that chip. You do need a little bit of that crazy, like that, some nasty to you to really, and if it's like really break through those barriers, because I know some people are just quiet and they're mid and they train hard, nothing against them. But then, like, if you really want, it's because the way I see it is, for me to accomplish what I want to, I have to destroy other people's dreams. To have what I want, I have to take it away from what other people want as well, because a lot of people covet the number one spot. And I feel like where my mindset and the fine line, because it is a very fine line, it's a silver lining. What helps me is like, man, like, I can't fail my family, because my family is proud of what I do. So it's like, I'm going to be damned if I let somebody else take away that moment that I want to share with my family, So it's like it's a silver lining. Obviously, you don't want to have that turned on all the time, because that's when it starts to bleed into your everyday life. And that's when you start to have conflicting interest and you have conflicts arise in your relationships and your friendships if you don't know how to turn it off. But make no mistake, gentlemen, I do have some nasty to me, because when it comes to game day, it's just, I feel like maybe it's the way I was cultured, the way I kind of came about in my younger days. But as far as like having that game day mentality, like that practice mentality, like it's very much there. When I need to just kind of elevate a little higher in training or on the platform, like I have that extra gear when I need it. But for the most part, like I'm pretty mellow. Like I train very composed, because I don't want to rely on emotional, like a boost per se. Like I don't know how to do, like I'm not someone who can just get angry at will. Like if I'm angry, it's because I'm angry about something real, not something from my past or whatever, right? Excuse me, like not to like knock down on other people who use past trauma for their temporary gain, right? Like that's just not who I am. Like I hate being angry. Like I hate being angry at other people, but at the same time, I understand that only one person can be at the top, and I'm gonna do everything I think I need to do, whether I'm right or wrong, in my pursuit of this goal, because like I have a code, I have morals, and I'm going to do everything I can through that filter to accomplish my end game. So I just wanted to add on that, because
No, I'm so glad you did.
It makes me sound like I'm just some lovey-dovey dude, which I mean, I try to be, but at the same time, I'm a very, very competitive person. Like this, anytime I see someone squat 700 pounds, I want to just load 900. Anytime I see somebody, there was this one time where I was benching and I was going to work up to like 540 for a single, and I saw somebody deadlift 540 across the gym, and something just clicked in my head where I was like, I need to make this bench move faster than their deadlift. And like, I feel like if you want to be the best and you want to break barriers and you want to be a trendsetter, not a follower, you need to have a bit of an edge to you, because when those days get hard, when there's the days where you don't want to go into the gym come and you're just like second guessing everything, you need to have that dog in you. You need to have a place to go, like a reserve, like a plan B to get what you need to do done. Because like in my line of work, in my mind, when I'm in the gym, when I have a certain weight, a certain set with certain reps, I don't give myself any other option than to execute. And I feel like that's just me. I can't speak for other people, but obviously I'm where I am today because of how I am. So maybe that'll testify a little bit to what I'm preaching.
I think it's a really good insight into how you've accomplished what you've accomplished. But and with all due respect, my friend, because only one of us is currently putting up this type of total. And maybe just with my coaching experience, I've seen this from working with a lot of different athletes. it's interesting to me that it's not the only way to be the best, you know? Because while, you know, when you talk to someone with your background and your mindset, and not that you're not unique, but I have talked to people with similar mindsets. And you mentioned how, you know, some of it probably came from your environment in team sports. It is an intrinsic part of who they are, and it helps them perform better. At least that's the way that you just described it. But it's also true that if someone never went online, never went on open powerlifting, and was strongly motivated by a personal desire to be the strongest version of themselves they could, and they showed up at some local meet, qualified for Nats, went to Worlds, and totaled 2.5 kilos more than you, and the first time they'd ever met you or heard of you was on game day, they'd still be the best, you know? So it's an interesting thing where that's not true in combat sports. And you said football is not a combat sport. It's not a combat sport, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, like especially as a lineman. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and especially if you have a goal to not to hit you know, the best total I have, but I want to be number one. Then you must have an awareness at least of who else is in that spot currently or is considered that way. So I think it 100% makes sense. I think it's energizing to hear you talk about it, and I have had that perspective, and I have worked with athletes who have that perspective, and I don't think it's necessarily a negative. And like you said, the fact that you have the ability to turn it on and off, and you know when to use it, and that's probably something you're always continually working on, as any, you know, progressive athlete would. I think that's fantastic. But it's just really interesting to me that I've worked with people who have pushed themselves to, you know, I've worked with world record holders. I've worked with people who've won you know, IPF Worlds and Nationals multiple times, who don't have that mindset, but they do want to be the best version of themselves, and the best version of them just happens to be better than the best versions of everybody else. And so it's intriguing to me when I get to observe athletes who are all trying to get the same thing, but there's not a single mentality that helps people get there. So
it's like that saying, there's more than one way to get to the top of the mountain.
Absolutely.
Jesus, real quick, because I have a little bit of commentary, but I have a question. I think I can conceptualize and get my mind behind it 100% when we talk about the whole concept of a contest of wills, where it is kind of combative. I assume, like in that hypothetical scenario with Ray Williams, when you compete against someone else, you want them to be at their best. Like, you want not only a fair fight, you want your toughest competition. This isn't an attitude, because I have encountered the opposite, and I don't think this is you at all. And that's the one I can't get behind. When I call it the win at any cost, or it's like, It's not about the level of competition, it's about me winning. Like, as far, just so I understand before I go on, would you say, like, when you compete and when this is the contest of wills and you want to take someone else down, like it's kind of zero sum, it's like me or them, you want them to be at their personal best, so you have to rise to the occasion. Is that fair? Is that a fair description, man?
No, that's 100% true.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I always tell people, it's like, I would rather put my heart 100% into everything that I'm doing to be the best I can on that given day. But even if I fall short, I can still go home knowing that I held my head high. I literally gave it everything I could. I would rather have a second place performance if it was 9 for 9 PRs across the board than if I had a victory where my opposition either got sick or something happened. Like, and I guess I can talk about this a little bit. My 2021 Raw Nationals performance, I felt like it was sullied because I only went 1 for 3 at the end of the meet. My top deadlift of the day was 760. That, I literally felt so embarrassed. I felt so humiliated by my own standards. I was ashamed of the performance I put forward, because it was not to my standard, or so I thought at the moment, because obviously the way that I was with my nutrition and my training, it showed on the platform. Powerlifting is a sport where the standard that you train at is reflective on meet day, right? So I honestly think that Ray could have beat me that day. And just that thought alone made me feel like I wasn't the best super in the world or in the United States. I was how do I say this? Like a phony. Like I shouldn't have won. I did not want that first place medal. Like it was an embarrassment. Obviously, I won by a lot, but like these are my standards. Like this is the standard that I hold myself to. If I'm not executing or training to the standard that I set before myself, it really gets to me and it kind of ruins my day. Like I recently had this bench session where my butt was coming up on like 80% of my reps. I almost like literally I was talking to my girlfriend and she had to convince me to stay home, but like I felt so bad. I literally just wanted to go back to the gym and fix it because that's just what I think is necessary to do what I want to do. And I guess you guys are coming from like, oh, like all I have to do left to be the best is beat Ray. But I want to be number one all time, regardless of federation. So like now we're bringing in like the untested people. And I feel like a lot of people are going to disagree or have their own opinions just because obviously I'm a natural athlete and they're on enhancements. I don't care about that because for me to do what I want to do and accomplish my goal with nothing but my God-given abilities, my work ethic, my resolve, my mentality, the people around me, it'll be the most undeniable feat in powerlifting history. And like, it'll be that. Like, that's it. It's going to be like tying it up in a ribbon and here's the present. So
I will accept that gift. That'll be Christmas. I don't care if it's February when that happens.
It's a new Christmas, Eric.
That's right. We'll change it. Yeah.
No, but I did want to say that's exactly what I thought, Jesus, because I've heard absolutely that mentality. I could get behind it. And when we talk about the concept of combat sports that we joke about, or I think what Eric was alluding to, and I'll say this briefly. Do you watch MMA at all? Like, do you watch UFC?
I've started to get into boxing a little bit. I watched the Canelo fight this past weekend, and then I watched the Canelo fight a couple months ago. So I'm not like super big on it, but I do watch the highlights, and I think I am gonna like kind of start watching. It is really entertaining. Like I used to watch a lot of boxing when I was a kid because my dad just loved it. So like they would like all my uncles and everybody would get together with like the pay-per-view, and it would be like a big family thing, especially if it was like a Mexican boxer.
Yep.
Like we would all get together to watch. But I think I don't know. It's like I don't want to say like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get on it because it is kind of like I feel like it's a mainstream thing, and I'm not really a fighter, man. Like I don't think I would ever get into combat sports or any sort of. Actually, I do want to learn a martial art because I'm really big on like Baki and like just martial arts, like as far as like anime and manga. So I think it'd be cool to pick up eventually someday. But as of right now, like it's not really my cup of tea. But nothing against it. Like if somebody invites me, I'm gonna go watch. Like it's fun to watch. It's entertaining. It's a good entertainment and a hell of a time.
So the reason I asked that is that you notice some of that similar shared mentality, and that's what I like what Eric said, where he said, football's not a combat sport, is that there is a necessary adversary. There's no way of getting around it. It is a contest of wills. And I want to kick it off actually to Eric from working. He's a champion caliber coach with a wide variety of different athletes, just in terms of the different mentalities that people bring to the table. And if you have seen some people shift over time, because I'm nowhere close to even remotely being a champion, but I could say my own personal mindset has shifted over time. So I know it is theoretically possible. I'm not sure what the outcome would be at that high of a level, but I do find myself remarking, and I'll keep it not as vague as possible, but I'll say this, that I used to think that some of what I would observe, because I trained at a gym where there was a decent amount of untested powerlifters, and I was privileged enough to attend some of the highest level of competition, which at the time was the highest level competition in an absolute sense in powerlifting for untested powerlifters. So like some world championship level stuff like Boss of Bosses and so forth. And so I saw these lifters, and inevitably you would see some of that obvious, some of the competitive juices flowing. And I'm joking, like, is it the exogenous testosterone where like they're pretty damn combative occasionally to one another? It's like, yeah, there's a lot of things going on in the mix. And then it was much to my surprise that when I got into like, tested powerlifting, observing it, going to some meets and interacting with some people, that same trait, it's a common trait across untested and tested. And I actually was joking, and so I'll keep this vague, but with the homie Jessica Bittner, where she came down here to train for a little bit, where she has those competitive juices, like just like you could just be you could literally be training arms, and it's or I'm joking like that's like, oh, what are you gonna lift? It's like, dog, this is day 3. It's a Tuesday for me. Like, it literally doesn't matter. But it just felt like I'm joking. Like, but I've encountered it on multiple occasions, and not even like, hey, Zeus, I think you're vocal about this aspect of yourself. But I would say, I guess, and I'm not trying to like make a caricature of Jessica, like she's a phenomenal athlete, but like just people, I guess, people that until you meet them in person, like there's a persona online, and maybe the persona matches up, or like some of these traits, like, oh damn, like you got it too. Like Taylor, as an example, I feel that Taylor, training with Taylor, because he's a team sport guy, I haven't trained with him yet, I think he'd be like cooperatively competitive is probably the phrase I would use, where it's like kind of, oh, you like Greg Knuckles is cooperatively competitive, so he wants to compete with you, Jesus, but he also wants you to be your best, so it's not like
Yeah.
like talking shit to you while you're doing it. And then there are some people where it's like it's just a flat out competition, and it's not like a, oh, like how much did you lift, what did you lift, a type of thing. It's like, oh, like we're just doing this right now. And I encountered, so I'll use another example because it's not related to anyone I mentioned, but there's a YouTuber as it's very common, like in places where ego's at the forefront, man, where there's a YouTuber, all of us like made up these exercises for us to do, and it was just like a competition on the spot. I'm like, why are we doing this again? Like, why, what is this theoretical thing? So to kick it over to Eric for a second, I was surprised personally, because that was my mindset coming. I thought it was maybe related to other things, it proved otherwise. But just if you could comment, give a little commentary, Eric, on the mentality you observe amongst elite level athletes, some of the shared traits, some of the differences, and how, like, for certain people, like, it's wonderful, Jesus, you know exactly, I think, what motivates you, what brings about your highest self. And I think that's ultimately one of the roles of the coach, is like trying to figure out what that pathway looks like.
Yeah. So if I can weigh in here, I think one thing I will say is that the individual sport is it has some uniqueness to it. So if someone doesn't have a team sport background, they're gonna sound and look and act and engage with this concept differently. But one thing that I can say is nigh universal across people who are not just flash in the pan high level competitors, like they get there and then they kind of drop off and never hear from them. That happens. Someone that's got the genetic talent, they get really, really excited about the prospect of winning. Maybe if you did get to engage with them, they would talk about like the value of winning, rather than like, maybe I didn't say anything about, I also want Ray Williams to be at their best, So if we talk about people who have a career arc as an elite level athlete, they hang out there is one common trait, and that is actually intrinsic motivation. And we often focus on the extrinsic because it's exciting. It becomes a contest of wills. It can be controversial. It can create drama. Like, I mean, people love to watch the pre-fight thing where the two guys are nose to nose, and they're like, it's almost exciting as the fight itself. That's not my bag, but I understand that. Like, I went to, I remember going to middle school in Oakland, right? And you could say, yo, fight, and start running a direction, and you could make 500 kids leave one area and go over there, and there could be nothing going on, right? Yeah. And people start running, and you just run with them, and you're like, where are we going? I don't know. I think there's going to be some drama. Yeah. That's human nature, right?
Yeah.
So, so many memories. So that, I think, is something that draws attention, but it's actually something that I was mentioning early is not always necessarily there. So we've talked to people on this podcast who are an extremely high level, and the extrinsic is a very minor aspect. It might come out in their personality, like you go train with Jess Bittner and she's ready to get after it.
Yeah.
But it is maybe more of a personality quirk and a natural inclination, rather than something that they've codified into their principles. But what you will find always, whether they have that extrinsic strong motivation of I want to be the best in the world, or in all federations across all people, like Jesus was saying, or not, is the intrinsic drive. Because you might have both, but you won't not have the intrinsic to be at a high level for a long time. And that's what I was hearing from you, Jesus, is you were talking about, like, look, I'm not really the best if I'm not at my best. And I would rather be second and be at my best than win. And I want to win. So I have seen some athletes that are, I know they're not going to stick around. Like they come off the platform, they went 1 for 3, and they've got a frown on their face. And then their competition goes on, bombs out, and they start smiling. And I'm like, weak. You know, like there's a few times I get super judgmental. Like, give me a break. Like, you know, and you see the same thing sometimes in competitive physique sport where people are trying to still enter the novice division. Like they decide on weigh-in day on Friday, like, hey, can I switch to novice? How many people are in novice? How many people are in open? Like, oh, there's only 3 people in novice. Oh, I'm guaranteed that at least bronze medal. Put me in there. I'm just like, get the fuck out. You know, like it just bothers me, right? Because it shows that they don't have any. What it really comes down to is they lack self-confidence. Mm-hmm. You know, they don't actually have self-belief that if I put myself in a true competition and I put myself forward, that I will be good enough. And I think it's extremely challenging to have that kind of level of self-doubt and a lack of self-confidence and compete at a very high level or maximize what you have. You can have great genetics and get decently far, but once you're competing against everyone who has great genetics, who also has self-confidence and belief, and they can use that to drive themselves rather than this corrosive fuel of, I hate myself, I'm not good enough, and I just want to hide this thing. You know, I'm actually a fraud. No one, I know that I'm shitty, but everyone else doesn't. So I need to keep hiding that, and I'll try to get into the novice division, or I hope you bomb out. Like, that mentality can't get you that far, at least not for very long. So I think that in my coaching experience, I've worked with people from different, you know, very different cultural backgrounds, different sporting backgrounds, and different personalities who have been at a high level. The one similarity is that in strong intrinsic motivation. Yeah.
That's really good. So I want to add 2 points. So something that Omar said about how at the beginning you thought this, but then now it's a little different. So when I first started, all I cared about was winning. Like, if it wasn't going to help me win or help me get better, I didn't really pay too much mind to it. But as I got older and I matured and I started, like, I met my girlfriend, we moved in together, I started to have to be more responsible. That's like, I had like this transition from strictly only wanting to care about winning to like, okay, like now I need to learn how to compartmentalize, separate this, leave it at the gym, focus on work, and like focus on being responsible financially, like making sure like groceries, bills, and all that. So it's like you have to be able to adapt mentally to the blessings coming your way, or else they're just going to fly over your head or they're going to slip through your fingers. And then number 2 is, I feel like what you just said right there is an issue right now for a lot of people. And I hope a lot of people don't get mad when I say this, but I think when it comes to like the junior divisions and the teen division, people are scared to go to the open because they want a guaranteed medal. They want a podium. When I was coming up, I was looking at it and I'm like, okay, winning for sure is a long shot, but shoot, maybe I can aim for third. And that was as a junior looking into the open. Like, for me, it was always about competing against the best to be the best, not trying to find this subcategory that's gonna 100% assure me a podium finish. Like, that to me, like, it is, well, I understand because it feels good when you win. It feels good when you get posted. It feels good to have a title of, oh, you're the junior national champ. But as far as like, what weight does that really have? Like, you know, and I guess it does matter. You know, I don't want to say that it doesn't, but I do think that if you don't allow that mentality to grow, it's going to stunt your performances and like your drive to push past what you're doing right now. Because if you're okay just being a junior champ, like, what are you going to do when you age out? And like you said, like, a lot of people literally dip out. Like, they have potential to maybe eventually podium in the open, but they don't want to put the work in for another 2-3 years. So they get their 3-time junior championships and then they dip. You never hear from them again. And you're like, oh man, like, this guy could have been like the next Ashton Ruska, or it could have been like the next so-and-so, but they just didn't have the commitment to work from the gap of junior to open because they were never planning on it. They were never planning on making that jump. So when they were faced with, when you essentially get age out, like, you have to, and, they'll just kind of disappear and you'll never hear from them again. And you're like, oh man, like so-and-so was promising. But I think you might have said something earlier about having the potential, but not the mindset to match that potential. And like, that's why you see people drop out. I think you might've said something earlier about that, Eric. And I just feel like those two things kind of go together. All right. Those are just my 2 points.
No, they do. And I said a lot of things. We like to have guests on and then spend more time talking than they do. That's the Iron Culture format. So, but this is funny. I had this realization and conflict within a period of 2 hours in my very first bodybuilding show. So I had planned to enter the novice division. It was my first show, which I didn't think was unreasonable. And then Alberto Nunez, who I competed with the first time now, like, my brother basically, he was in the open and he was like, dude, you should do the open, like jump in there, like why not? And I was like, well, but I'm a novice. He's like, just do it, like this is my first time competing too. And I was like, all right, cool. So I won the novice tall and I'm thinking like, I have a bright future, like I am incredibly talented at this. And then out of three dudes, by the way. And then 10 minutes later I placed 4th out of 4 in the open, and I was like, "Oh no!" Like the bipolar experience. I'm really glad it happened because it shook me out of that kind of delusional, like let's use that to cover up my own insecurities and just try to find a way where I can feel this fake false confidence. And then I looked at my pictures that I got like the couple days. Like you get almost immediately because you get like a CD back then. And I had my color was off, my posing was off. I presented myself poorly to my own capacities at that time. And what I decided to do was a week later, I entered an untested show, the NPC Contra Costa, which is a huge show. It is a national qualifier. Jay Cutler at the time, Mr. Olympia, was the guest poser. And I placed, along with 7 other people, 15th out of 23, because after a certain point they don't even try to place you. It's just like a DNF, like everyone's 15th. So in the NPC Contra Costa middleweights, I placed 15th along with 7 of my brethren. So I was probably like 18th, 19th, 23rd, I don't know. Yeah. But I looked way better. I had all the lacking things that a first time competitor does in terms of lacking muscle mass, symmetry. I could have gotten leaner, all that stuff, but my posing was substantially improved, my color was improved, and I peaked well. I presented myself in a way that I was proud of. And that was a pivotal moment because I felt better about my DNF than I did winning the novice just a week prior. And it was because of that kind of quick turnaround kind of, shock to my system that I had. And I think it would have, like you said, Jesus, it would have stunted my growth as a bodybuilder and my honesty with myself to improve upon weak points and to get the most out of myself. And I probably would have, if I just managed to stay on that path, I had a lot of positive influences why I didn't, but the point is that pathway would have led to me not staying in the sport. And now I get a lot more enjoyment out of it. And I've pushed myself much further than I thought I would, which is, I think, kind of cool. So you definitely have to have that internal drive, and it might be a zero-sum game when you're going for the top spot, but it doesn't mean that you're hoping for someone else to fail so you can succeed, Yeah.
I think a really big thing about that is you need to expose yourself to some of these losses because those losses will become your greatest lessons. Because the way I see it is, if somebody is better than me, it's because they're doing something that I'm not, or I can gain something from them. I can learn something from them, and I can adopt what they're really good at. If it's either something philosophical or something that they just do in training, I can then learn from them and improve myself. And that's how you keep improving. And that's the whole point of competition. It's just literally iron sharpening iron.
My man.
Jesus, I want to give you a huge compliment, man, because there's a lot of wisdom in this vessel I'm seeing before us. Okay, this hunk right here, and I mean that sincerely, because I'm gonna go off on a tangent that's gonna bring us right back to the compliment that you definitely deserve, and that is It's so funny you say that. The openness and willingness to be vulnerable, to expose yourself to certain weaknesses, is directly contrary to the social media reward mechanisms that actually, when you said junior and teen, so I haven't paid as much attention to like the junior and teen divisions in powerlifting recently, but I can attest to, I joke, the TikTok generation. And what I mean when I say that is that a lot of people now think about social media, right? Your best image, the thing that presents yourself in the best possible light will get the biggest reward. So the strongest you look, the most muscular you look, so on and so forth. And it's to your benefit directly as a feedback loop in terms of likes, how people perceive you, that you are basically the dude. So you never kind of want to expose yourself. Sure, you might have that, and it's become like a cliche of like a here's me at my most raw or my most vulnerable. But even that is it's a planned response. Social media rewards you for basically creating the illusion of your best possible self, and I think to have that dog in you, you need to get tested. And that's exactly what you're saying. And too many people are afraid of being perceived, a certain way, being weak or losing or any of those things. And I'll just say that to Eric's point, and I think a lot of people learn this at some sort of capacity in a very small way. Years ago, that's why when I feature a collab, the few times I've like in quotations competed against someone, it wasn't someone that theoretically I knew I had in the bag. It was someone who was really good at what they were doing because I actually wanted to challenge myself and I knew it was a different. So, Alan is an example, my buddy Alan. First time I ever did a strongman thing, we did the California Death Medley. Literally the thing the guy won at. And I'm like, yeah, like, let's do it. And he set it up for us and all that other stuff. And the goal wasn't, of course, I tried my absolute best. And it was amazing to have someone far ahead of me. But it wasn't like this ego stroke that you see online where it's like, that's why I joke with Eric. I joke all the time. Like, if I was doing a bodybuilding show, Eric, I would enter like the Ontario. So I'm in this province of, Canada, the Coburg Invitational. There's like 3 competitors and you'd win. People do that way too. Like, they need to see themselves a certain way. Instead, you should go, as you said, Jesus, where the competition is. And I think that's an invaluable lesson. And I just want to say that the compliment I want to give you, my man, is that is directly contrary to what we see in modernity, the willingness to put in the work. But also the big compliment I want to give you is what I would maybe coin the phrase, the endless goal. You already have baked into your career trajectory enough tiered goals that there's always something more. And that kind of is once again a little contrary to maybe like the rocky journey where there's that theoretical hill to climb. And once you're on that hill, like, man, if I could just beat Apollo Creed, that's it for me. Like, people want to get lean for summer or whatnot. Like, I just get to that 12% body fat and you touch it, like you cross the finish line and then immediately you're done, like you're retired. Whereas what I heard from you at the tender age of 24 years, and I'm not trying to like fixate on the age, but it's just like where you're at, what your potential is, and where you see yourself, is that this is like, let's say, step 6, and you already have like the next 8 steps already lined up, which is really good from structuring your journey, because too often you'll see people, it's like there's some sort of end point that will bring a level of satisfaction that the dog in them goes away. And I could tell by the conviction in your voice, that's what instills me with confidence in your journey, that like, all due respect to, like, Ray is the man. Ray is an absolute legend in the sport. In your head already, I could tell this. It's not like, oh, I already beat Ray or whatnot. That's like, that is an accomplishment. It is not the end accomplishment. You having the best total amongst, tested IPF lifters is not the end goal. You even theoretically having the all-time super heavyweight total amongst tested or untested is part of the goal for sure. But in my head, when I hear that from you, it's kind of like a Taylor Atwood, where it's like, you want to kick it so far ahead. It's not just about winning. It's about making a declaration, being declarative. And I think that's just awesome, man. That, like, we're already hearing this because sometimes people are like, man, if I just win that Worlds again, I'm like a 2-time world. Like, that's it for me. There's a lot of dog in you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. That's something that me and my brother like to talk about. And if there's one person that I feel has more dog than me, it'd be my younger brother, Pablo. I hope that maybe one day you guys might be interested enough to hear his story, because I feel like he's like the missing half to what I'm saying, because his philosophy is a little different than mine, but it complements it really well, because his perspective is from he's my younger brother, so he's always had to like been in my shadow, like been behind me, and for him to like take up arms with me and pursue this goal with me, despite me being in front of him, and then just me getting to see him every single day put the work in and go even further beyond. Like, it's just like that's really what it comes down to. It's like it's really as simple as asking yourself or somebody else, do you have that dog in you? And only time will tell. Time is the ultimate test for everything, so only time will tell.
Well, that's exciting. We might have a family dynasty on our hands, folks. And I wouldn't be mad if I saw it. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw it either. So you mentioned how you learn from your competition and you maybe incorporate things into training. Talk to me a little bit about what have you, to the degree that you're comfortable, what are some of the things that have changed in your training, and what would you say is kind of some of the overarching approaches that you guys take from a programming perspective that is working for you right now? So obviously, if you could characterize your training, obviously that's a big question. It's a big question, but I'd love to know more about, what is it you're doing on a day-to-day basis in the gym?
People are always so like shook when I tell them, but I literally squat on Monday, I bench Tuesday, I rest Wednesday, I deadlift Thursday, and I bench on Friday, and I do nothing on the weekends. That is it. That is as simple as it gets. That is the meat and the potatoes. That's literally the same split that we have been running for the last 3 years, and I'm sure Joey wouldn't care with me talking about this just because it's the most basic, most foundational program that anyone could ever run. So it's like you literally asked me like, to dive into this whole like conversation as far as like the things we've had to tweak, and it's like we've literally haven't had to tweak anything since we've started. Like, it's just literally been the exact same every single week, every single day since day one to today. It has been the exact same.
I love it. And
we do change the accessories. Okay, my bad. We change accessories to keep things fresh, and then obviously I'll have like my own little bodybuilding stuff that I do for like rehab, just like to prevent injury. But as far as like programming, it has literally been the same. All right, you can go ahead.
I love it, and I think there are certain trends you notice among people who get really, really strong, especially supers, is that less can be more. And I think there's only so many times in a week that you can be like, let's load 900 pounds on the bar. Like that takes a lot, and I do think that it doesn't quite just scale with relative load. Like 80% for some people doesn't feel like 80% for other people. You can see that we've actually, looked at this in research, like there's a relationship between how many reps you get at a submaximal load if you were to go to failure with body mass, and it's inverse. So like heavier individuals who are doing as many reps as they can with 70% of their 1RM squat, they're not going to get as many reps as someone who's lighter. It doesn't explain all the variance by any means, don't get me wrong, but there's something there. And this is just kind of a ubiquitous thing that when you talk to really strong people who are invariably larger people, that there's only so much they can do without it becoming detrimental. So I think that doesn't surprise me that much. So let me ask you a little more of the X's and O's. Do you guys use much singles in training? Is it like singles and back off work, or is it more just like straight sets? Is there rep ranges you guys like to operate in?
So yeah, we pretty much keep singles in year round. The only time that I will probably not do a single is like the intro week back after a meet.
Oh yeah.
So like we'll take a week off after competition. So a full week off. Like let's say I compete Saturday or Sunday. I will not, obviously, like I'm probably still going to the gym to do something. But as far as like getting back on the program, like we squat on Monday, I'll probably just have like volume. It'll be like just reintroducing a little bit of volume depending on how much time we have to the next meet. So I guess to kind of give a little bit of a more detailed description, like, so we already have planned what we're going to do after Worlds because we have Sheffield coming up in March. So for the first 4 weeks after Worlds, I think we're literally gonna have like probably the easiest, like it's almost like taking a month off essentially without really taking a month off. So I think that might be the longest I've gone without taking a single. But realistically, like the way that Joey's taught me to program and what it's because people have this misconception where when you have a single in their brain, they're like, ooh, like this single is supposed to like test where my strength is on the day. And that could not be further from the truth, because I believe that the best utilization of a single in training is merely to like, it's the prime for your back downs, your working sets, whether you're doing ascending or drop, and then to practice comp specification, right? Because, man, like, and I always tell my guys, I'm like, I don't care if we miss a lift on strength, because that just means we didn't have it on the day. But if we miss a lift on some sort of technicality, that is on us. That can 100% be eradicated, and it's an issue that should never happen if you harp on it hard enough. So for me, I just try to replicate that comp specification. But I think for me personally, I think these singles do have a big payoff, because my body will stay in a constant state of being familiar with 900 plus. Because when I take a week off after competition, like I can feel the difference from like 800, like 700, 800, and 900. And it's like, it's a big gap as far as like my nervous system just being comfortable in that situation, like the way my body feels, like the reaction. So I think for me, it's pretty important. And I could say maybe for a lot of people as well, like it's important to keep your body familiar with competition. How does it know? Like just what you're going to hit in competition, like kind of relatively close. So it's for practice, and it's to get your body ready to hit. It's like essentially the last warm up before your working sets, because your working sets is where, if that's your meat and potatoes, that's where you're either going to grow some muscle or you're going to really push, because you're not really going to get stronger after doing singles, but like sets of 5, 6, 7, 8, like that's when your body, that's where that stimulus starts to kick in, and you're either going to get stronger or put on muscle or both, right? So like a good example is last week, I hit 937 for my single, but then my top set, which I say was more impressive, was my 815 for 5. So I hit 937. That's probably going to be somewhere between my opener and my second. So it's kind of keeping it relatively close to what we're going to hit in comp. I made sure that it was to comp standard. Like I walked it out. I waited for a squat command. I squatted to depth. I waited for a rack command, and then you rack it, right? So that's facilitating all the facets or just that comp specificity, because those are cues and things you need to remember. Because could you imagine if you're about to squat 1,000 pounds and you rack it before the command? Like that would just be so embarrassing. But oh man, I think I'd cry if I racked out of excitement. I would cry. But so then you have that, and then after, you still have to stay in that mindset of, okay, like I'm not done. I feel like most people, when they hit a single that heavy, it's really easy for them to be like, okay, man, like that was heavy as hell. Like I gotta like take my back downs easy. But for me, since I only squat once a week, I have to make the most of it. I can't just afford to have too many lackadaisical squat sessions, because then I'm not really gonna progress. Like I'm in a position where I need to be hitting at least 1 or 2 sets. Obviously not like my introduction week, because like the first 2 weeks when I'm out for a while, those are like my 2, like it does take me like a week or 2 before I can get back to like my baseline where I can do like 700 for sets of 7 or 8. But I feel like I'm at a point now where if I want to continue to grow my squat, I need to hit like those weight ranges. So I lost my train of thought, but I feel like that. I hope that kind of gives a little bit more insight as far as like how we try to set up like our singles, our working sets, and how we like kind of restructure like accessories to really support and hit like muscle areas that we really don't hit when like we squat, bench, or deadlift.
It's a fantastic answer, and I actually think it's indicative of one of the most important programming paradigm shifts that's happened in powerlifting in the last half decade or decade or so, at least in terms of when it's become popular, which is the acknowledgement that strength is not just a aspect or a physiology, or it's not just a quality of the body, but it's also a skill. And I heard people say that 10 years ago, but they didn't necessarily reflect it in their programming. You know, you kind of had like the Ripito, like, hey, fives are strength. And it's like, why? Well, because they do both hypertrophy and strength. And it's like I'm saying one thing, there's a skill component to this, and we're competing and doing singles, but then my actions and what I actually put on the Excel sheet don't match that, because I'm kind of in this more physiological kind of paradigm of thinking. And to now see just how ubiquitous it's become and how commonplace, and that there's a philosophical understanding of it, which is exactly what you just said, that, hey, this single is here for me to, you know, improve my skill. But I also understand that that's not necessarily enough volume for me to produce those underlying adaptations that will support that skill. And now we see this, okay, I've got these singles in, and there's a time and place where maybe they don't matter. Like, I'm just trying to recover from doing 9 singles for the biggest meet of the year. I'm going to pull them out and then bring them back in for recovery purposes or what have you, or just mental fatigue. And then I have this back off work, and those both change depending on where I'm at, what I need, etc. And I think that's it's cool to see, because I have talked to a number of high-level competitors who, I don't want to sound judgmental, but let's just say their programming is lacking some certain principles that I know would have a high probability of making them better, and I know they're getting by just on the fact that they are a hardworking, you know, person with great genetics, and you know, it's kind of like, and they don't get exposed to these concepts, or maybe they don't want to change anything because they're succeeding. But it's good to see that there has been this, like I said, a paradigm shift to where that is something much more common. And I do think it's part of the reason why we're seeing, you know, the athlete caliber go up. And of course, it has to do with a lot of other factors. But I think that that's really cool to hear. And I think it is, you know, a good lesson for everybody, really, to see that this isn't just something that like your 63 kilo competitor does. Like, oh, they can handle singles, you know, because they're only squatting X, Y, and Z. It's like, my man's putting 800 and 900 pounds on his back on a week to week basis. You have to, you know, if you want to squat 1,000 pounds, you can't just always be messing with what you can do for 5+ reps. There's a skill involved. And I think that's something I would echo and agree with. And that's great insight. So I really appreciate that answer.
Sure.
Hey Zeus, I maybe one of the last questions I want to ask you, because I think it's maybe every guy's fantasy, because I'll at least speak to the male section of Iron Culture, where it's like, okay, being super heavyweight, man, I got to eat whatever I want. Like, here we go. Like, I got to put on that quality weight. You know, I want to put on muscle. Like, you know, I think of a lot of fighters or competitors where they have to like cut down or whatnot. I, however, have the sneaking suspicion that being an absolute Hulk not only takes more work, it's very laborious, and sometimes I wonder about the food enjoyment. So can you just talk to me, because I saw you like pre us recording this, like you're drinking this, you have your gallon of water, like you got your stuff set up. Can you just talk to me about the nutrition side of things, like what that's like? Like, does it ever become laborious? I sat down and actually ate, this was when he was transitioning, half Thor, to, I guess, what you describe in quotations as a more clean diet, so like more whole food oriented, so on and so forth. But I could tell you this, because he ordered a big meal. He wasn't struggling. Let me not disrespect him, but food's work is all I'll say. Food was work for him to maintain that weight.
Yeah. And I think this is like the perfect time for me to give my lovely girlfriend all the credit in the world.
Hey.
Because I love you, baby. So she's actually cooking right now. I don't know what are you cooking, baby? Oh, you're meal prepping? The audience wants to know what I eat on a daily and weekly basis. Beef and broccoli, baked salmon, some Thai noodles, and ground turkey and rice.
What?
So,
Ooh, that's clean.
people like a good friend of mine is Mr. Ashton Ruska. Like,
Yep.
I'll talk to him sometimes about what I eat, and he'll be like, "What the hell, dude? Like, I eat more than you." But I've actually had some meals with him, and he'll like leave his plate half full. So I feel like when he's telling me that he eats more than me, just making sure the man's getting his calories. He's got a big competition ahead of him. But so that has been the biggest transition for me, because when I went from my 2020 December performance to nationals, I went from pulling 400 kilos at 350 pounds body weight to only pulling 760 at like 370. That scarred me. It scarred me because at the time, my girlfriend was a part of an organization where we would have to drive to Houston like every other week. So I was traveling a lot. I was on the road a lot. I was just eating a bunch of like road food. My leverages started to change. My hands got bigger, and I didn't really think it was going to affect my deadlifts as much, but it did. My deadlifts, like, they tanked just because my leverages changed. It was a lot harder to hold onto the bar because I used to wear wrist wraps because of the additional compression on those tendons, how it's like supposed to help you grip the harder to prevent slippage, and everything was just kind of starting to fall apart. And like I said, when I won, I felt like a phony because I was not at my best. I felt like somebody else should have won, because like that was a piss poor performance on my behalf, regardless of my title. It was just subpar, below standard. But after that, this is when I really started to kind of get my stuff together, because I started training my grip. I started like really, really keen on my lockouts, on my forearm exercises. The fourth thing was my diet. Like, I really, really, like, I have had these conversations with my girlfriend where I'm like, okay, babe, I need to eat like this to get to where I need to be, because like all the traveling, all like the bad food, it wasn't cutting it. So whenever we do go out to eat on a date night, we make sure that it's like a very macro friendly place. Like, we literally only go to like Korean barbecue places, so it's like literally protein and rice with like whatever vegetables they bring you, or we go eat all you can eat sushi, like, again, white rice, fish. So when I do treat myself, I try to make sure that I'm treating myself with nutrient-rich food, like food that is just going, like, it's kind of stays in the same ballpark, right? Obviously, when you go to like Korean barbecue or all you can eat sushi, like, you're gonna pig out a little bit. But as long as you're pigging out with food that you normally eat, it just kind of goes along with the process, right? So that has probably been like the biggest help. You've been a great help to me, baby. Like, it's been the biggest help as far as like just continuing to improve and evolve and upgrade as an athlete and as a competitor, because this is a 3-lift sport. Like, I need everything to be on point to be the best that I can be. And nutrition, I feel, is something that a lot of powerlifters they're not really disciplined with, because there's like this negative stigma of, oh, like, I can eat whatever I want, like, as long as I train heavy, like, there's no cardio, there's no bodybuilding accessory movements, they just go up bench deadlift and eat whatever they want, right? But I promise you, like, if you start to look at the people who've stepped it up a notch, they've just found like a different gear, they've just evolved in some way, shape, or form. Ask them what they eat, more. I'm not going to give you like a number, but I'm willing to bet that maybe 75% at least, their diet is reflective of their training and their discipline. So like that's a lot of people have been asking me to do like eating videos. So maybe that might be like the next one. I don't know if my girlfriend won't want to cook all day for that, but so, I mean, maybe if you guys are listening, just be on the lookout. Maybe in like a day in the Jesus's diet video or something like that. But yeah, man, I really try to watch what I eat. I try to watch my girlish figure per se. So yeah, man. I hope guys finally get the answer to that question.
I love the girlish figure. And also, something I want to point out, we mentioned earlier, the comparison between, you and Ray and the nearly decade apart from when you guys were totaling these very close amounts. I also want to just put forth that I want to say you're 15 or 20 kilos light. At least you were 15 or 20 kilos lighter than Ray, putting up that same number. And I think some people just think, oh, like the bigger you can get as a super heavyweight, the better, because you don't have to worry about like strength to body weight ratio. But this is a common thing that a lot of people say who are taller or larger lifters, especially, you look at strongman as well, is that like this that might positively affect my bench and squat, but it can negatively affect my deadlift. So I think you do have to have some awareness of that. And the fact that you've got such a monster deadlift of over 400 kilos, and that you attribute some nutrition to that, I think is just further kind of like anecdotes in favor of that. And that's great insights, because I think sometimes people don't necessarily make that association, and they kind of just think about, oh, the height of supers, and it's like, well, like when you're that big, like the body dimensions of a deadlift, they can be counterproductive, and you have to think about like, where is that balance? And it sounds like you found it.
Well, Jesus, we're now at the point we've gone on the journey together, all of us, to, you're the world champion. We're just tagging along on the journey. You walked us through your personal journey, the mental process, the emotional, the physical, the training side, the dietary aspects, the changes that you made. Is there anything you want to circle back to, talk a little bit more in depth about, or maybe a new topic to open up before we kind of wrap it up? Because I do think this was a really cool, like how we opened it, the journey once again that we went on, and how we arrived now at kind of like the brass tacks, so to speak, of the questions. And I think like you understand this, that the questions that we ask near the end about training, nutrition are the obvious ones, but people think they're going to uncover the nuggets that produced Jesus, and we know this from being here for a long time. Like that's merely an aspect of the whole story.
Yeah. I guess like if you want to talk about aspects and perspectives and all that, it's just I don't know, because I think when I first started, in my mind, I did not think I was that talented. I 100% accredit my results to my way of thinking, because for whatever reason, I was never the best student. Even when I wanted to be, I just could not devote myself to studying relentlessly. Whenever I was working labor jobs, I couldn't devote myself to being the best worker I could be. But somehow, some way, like life, God has guided me to this point. He made me the way that I am. He gave me these gifts. He put these people in my life. I give all the credit to God, because he made me like this. He gave me this gift and it's kind of weird, because at the beginning in my head, I'm like, man, like I'm not the most talented, because I feel like the most talented powerlifters I've ever met were from the class of high school powerlifters that I was in. But unfortunately, those individuals, like they prioritize different things. Life took them in different directions. So they aren't where I'm at right now because of those reasons, right? Like whether they had a kid, whether they got locked up, whether they just wanted to pursue like financial means, right? They just wanted to get the bag, like easy peasy. Like just the direction that life has taken me to be where I'm at. Everything from like my body composition, like a good example is people used to ask me like, man, like what do you do to be in such a great shape for a super? And in my head, I'm like, man, like I literally just lost 20 pounds because I got the flu. Like it wasn't intentional. Like it was just by circumstance. So I don't know. It's just, I guess I'm going to flip this from like a perspective aspecting to like more of like some advice is
get the flu.
No, it's like just because life throws you lemonade doesn't mean you know how to make lemonade. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, oh, like life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But I'm like Like, what's the first step in making lemonade? And they're like, you squeeze the lemon? No, like, there's an order to things. So I feel like you have to be ready and prepared and understand what to do with those lemons when life throws them your way. So fortunately for me, when I kind of started this journey, I already knew or had an idea or what I needed to accomplish and make the lemonade. So when these lemons came my way, man, I was ready to sweeten the water, slice and dice, squeeze every last drop, and got that thing on swirl. So you got to be ready. You got to be ready to catch. You got to be ready to know what to do when you get your blessings, because just as easily as it is to get to this position by chance, it is also just as likely that you're going to miss your opportunity and things are going to slip through your hands if you're not ready.
I love it. Have that fold-up table and chair ready. You need a tablecloth. You need the little sandwich sign that says lemonade 10 cents, and that's even before the lemons come your way. So I think that's fantastic advice. I love the analogy. I think that's a great way to end it. And I just want to say personally, and also on behalf of the Iron Culture podcast, that I really appreciate your time, your openness, and what you bring to the sport, and that you're taking the time to give back. And I think you will have a bright future regardless of this, but I wish you the best moving forward. And it'll be a privilege to watch and see you do the damn thing. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you guys for having me on.
No,
it's a pleasure.
Jesus, I just want to echo what Eric said, that it's been great to watch you from afar, but now to get to know you a little bit and hear about the man behind the lifts gives even greater perspective and appreciation. So I just want to thank you for being on. I want to thank each and every single person for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. You could go ahead and leave that rating and review. People typically, 98 or 9% of the time, give 5 stars, but we do believe in free choice, so leave what you think is appropriate. We will read them at the start of the episode, and we'll see you every single Monday. We'll catch you in that next episode.